and welcome to Spotlight on the Arts. I'm Karen Stevens, and I am your host tonight. Today we are calling this show Outre Theatre, a living art form. Before we get started, let me introduce our panel. Miss Iris Acker, actress and producer of Spotlight on the Arts. Bill Hirschman, theater critic and founder of FloridaTheaterOnStage.com. And Mr. Michael McKeever, who is an actor and playwright. Our special guest today is Skye Whitcomb, the artistic director of Outre Theatre. Welcome, Skye.
Thank you, Karen.
So good to have you here.
Thank you.
With your handsome self.
I try.
Could you tell us what you mean by when you say a living art form?
Sabrina Gore, our managing director, and I, when we think of theater, we don't think of it as being, words on the page. It is something that is alive and in front of you, and it's someone that you can reach out and you can touch. And because of that, it's an art form unlike any other. There is a synergy between the audience and the artist. And because of that, it's always growing, it's always changing. And those of us who see a lot of theater, we already know that if I see a show opening night and I go back a week later, it is not the same show. And because of that, we look upon theater as something that is always alive and always growing and always changing.
Is that something that you arrived at, a concept you arrived at through your vast background in the theater? Could you elaborate on your background in the theater a little bit?
I've been acting since I was 8, directing since I was 16. I've worked in a variety of regional markets before we came to South Florida. But really it came from watching the interaction as an audience member more than as an artist, of going back and seeing shows that I really enjoyed and noticing how for every time that I saw a show, there was something that had changed, there's something that had grown. And to me, that was fascinating. If I go and I see a painting, the painting doesn't change. I may change, but the painting itself doesn't change. With this, the artist has changed. The art has changed. And I found that fascinating. It's unlike any other form of art.
That speaks to the organic nature
most
of
certainly.
the art.
Most certainly.
Yeah.
You made a statement saying, when you go back again, it's not the same play or it's not the same performance. I wonder how playwrights think about that. I wonder how a director thinks about that it's changed. The way you're saying it, it's really changed. It gets better, I know, after opening night usually.
Well, you have to hope.
But I'm just saying, is that good?
I think that is fantastic, to be perfectly frank, that it's a growing and organic art form. As a director, when I direct my shows, I direct it knowing that it's going to change and knowing that at this point I would like this tableau and this feel, and at this point I would like this tableau and this feel. But I want my actors to discover how to get from point A to point B on their own. And if that changes from night to night, that adds to the realism of it.
I have to say, I completely agree. As a playwright, when you put something on stage, as long as that finished product is within the boundaries of what you've written and what you've designed as a writer, and the director has directed, you add in that final element, which is the audience. And I've been as an actor on stage where each night it changes based on the reaction and the input that you get from that audience. I think it's important to always remember that ingredient that the audience is going to impact the feel and the vibe of that particular night's performance.
The audience is an important part of the theater, of the show.
Well, and when I go see a show, usually on opening night, it's almost frustrating because I know I'm seeing, hopefully, a finished, polished product. But there have been times I've gone back a week or two later, if I really liked it, to bring somebody else to see it. Or I've had somebody else review it, and I come to see it as a Carbonell judge a couple of weeks later. And it's a different show.
Yeah.
And I almost wish we could review a show 2 weeks into the production.
Right. Sometimes we do too.
I wonder if sometimes it's not better, but not as good as it was, too. But let's talk more about Outre Theatre.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, how are you different from all other theaters?
Our mission, I guess, for lack of a better term, is to create theater that sole purpose is to make you think when you leave. Not just when you're watching it, but when you walk out of the theater, that something about it stays with you. We're very much into community outreach. We're very much into social justice and social awareness. The plays that we choose to do, we want people to recognize the world in which we live and to do something about it. If there are things that need to be done, you have the old saying that art holds a mirror up to nature, and sometimes it's a funhouse mirror, and things get kind of twisted. But it's to say this is what we have, and if you're comfortable with that, then that's okay. But if you're not, go do something about it.
Why don't you give a couple of examples, a couple of shows you've done that fit that?
Sure. This past season, last season, we did Back of the Throat. This was a show that was set in the years just post 9/11, and it dealt with an Arab American who did not speak Arabic and was not Muslim, and he was a writer. And because of his racial background and because of his name, he was immediately assumed to be guilty of something. And agents show up at his door, and what starts off as a very benign conversation takes a very, very dark turn, and everything he says becomes twisted. And it's a reminder that it's not just, that this can happen to anybody. It's not just about a particular race or gender or ethnic background or whatever. It's whoever is not in power at the time. And that can be twisted to be gay or African American or male or female. It doesn't matter.
So it's a message. What you're
Yes.
saying is you do plays with messages.
Yes, that we want you to think when you go out and to look at what is occurring in our world and to hopefully do something about it.
How do you find your plays when you're looking for these sort of plays that have messages that address certain topics? How do you find the product?
A lot of it is going to other theater communities and talking with people that I know who work in those communities, especially Chicago, and asking, what have you done recently? What have you seen recently? What have you read recently that I might not have heard of? Sabrina and I both comb through new plays all the time, looking for things that catch our attention, whether that be reviews of plays in Chicago or West End or off-Broadway, or just plays that maybe have been around for a few years that we haven't read. Because a lot of our friends know the kind of shows that we like to do, they'll send us scripts and say, you really need to check this out. And so we've got a list of probably about 170 shows that we want to do eventually.
Good for you.
That's great.
That's a great pool to jump into.
Absolutely, absolutely. What is it in your experience that drove you to want to create a space to address social issues in the theater?
In theater, as in all art form, we have the opportunity, unlike a lot of other venues, to really hit what people think and what they feel, to really draw something out of them, and to have something that will stay with them for a long time. And there is most certainly a place for entertainment. There's most certainly a place for shows that you go in and you love, and then you go out and it's done. There's definitely a place for that. But there's a lot of that, and there's not a lot of the kind of stuff that we do. And so we just wanted to create, as you said, create a space where this is normal, where someone who comes to see a show that Outre puts on knows that we're going to deal with power relationships in sex, or we're going to deal with ethnic profiling, or we're going to deal with child abuse. We're going to deal with these uncomfortable truths.
And the audience accepts because they love you. That's it. That has to be a love between those who are offering it and those who are watching. Now, let's talk about your audience a minute. You're very brave. You are moved. And you are now at the Broward Center of the Performing Arts.
Yes, we are.
Is that the Abdo? I never know if I
Yes,
said
the Abdo New River Room.
New River Room. So the audience that you had in Meisner Park and Palm Beach before, are they going to come to the Broward Center and follow you?
Many of them did not. Just to be honest, they did not. We lost probably about a third of our audience with the move.
Wow.
But Shelley Bradshaw at the Broward Center has been very, very helpful to us. And we've been rebuilding our audience. And our audience in Meisner Park, a lot of it was FAU students. And they are still willing to make that drive down. And we're gathering more and more of the downtown Fort Lauderdale audience.
Good. That's
30s,
nice to hear.
40s. We don't have, our audiences range. You can't really look at, any of you guys who have seen our shows, you know, you come into an audience, you'll see teenagers and you'll see people in their 70s. You'll see all racial and class backgrounds. We don't really focus on a particular demographic.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's you're right. I've noticed that, and I think that's great. When I've come to see your shows, the audience is very diverse, very in age and background and ethnic origin, and they really seem to enmesh themselves in what's going on, you know, at the moment, which I think says a lot about your company and the energy that you know, emanate, you know, and I think that's pretty special.
Well, we do a lot. We actively attempt to bring in as wide of a net as possible, especially those folks that are not considered to be, I guess, typical theater goers in South Florida. And that's very, very true. But I guess as an example, one of our board members also works with a nonprofit that works with the Sistrunk area. And so what we're attempting to do is to do outreach in the Sistrunk area, to go into their community centers.
That's nice.
And to bring not just the kids, but their parents and their teachers into our shows for free so that they can see this is what we do.
Yes.
And you don't have to worry about paying a ticket price because we want you to be part of this.
Do you attract the actors as well? Karen, for example, is it a... No, really, I mean, I'm just saying,
Thanks, Iris.
Is this the kind of theater, would you like to, you know what I'm saying, is this the,
Yes,
is he doing the kind of
absolutely.
work that you,
Absolutely.
you know, I think that's important. Do you attract the actors?
I hope so. I know that most of us in this community are very, very supportive of the work that everyone does. And we want to go out and to see everyone's work. And the love that I know Sabrina and I feel from our community is very, very strong. We know that we've got a great deal of support. And we in turn like to go out and see as many shows as possible.
Well,
I think I was
good.
telling Bill I've seen 6 shows in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Because we want to do that. We want to go out and see other shows and
Yeah, I'm
support other
glad.
people.
I've met you at the theater, that's
Yes.
nice.
Which you can't say about all the artistic directors in this community. But you don't always see
true.
them
No,
out
they
there.
don't.
I'm a couple of things, but one thing you had mentioned when you were talking about outreach, we had talked in the green room about, you have a program with, is it Grace Arts?
Grace Arts. Grace Arts.
I thought it was fascinating. Can you talk a little about this
Sure.
program?
We just began work on this. We've received a grant from the state, and we're waiting on word from an NEA grant and a grant from the city. But what this would be is we would be going into the high schools of underserved and underprivileged communities, including Overtown and Liberty City and Lauderhill, and teaching the kids how to write sonnets. And when they've written sonnets, ask them to write about their experiences, about their lives. And then we're going to take those and we're going to fold them together and create what amounts to a retelling of the Romeo and Juliet story set in modern day South Florida, sort of 10 Things I Hate About You takeoff of Taming of the Shrew, where it's kind of the rough storyline, but it is these kids, it is their lives, it is what happens to them, as opposed to seeing a world that they don't relate to. And having them involved in the creation of that. It's a 2-year project. We're going to take about a year to go into the schools, and we've reached out to Teddy Harrell and some of the other African American leaders in the community, because what we don't want, honestly, is for another group of white people walking into these areas and saying, this is what you need to know, and which it totally defeats the purpose. So we've reached out to them, and so that'll be the first year, and then the second year will be the building of the show and casting it and hopefully touring it around the nation.
So I was going to say, so the end goal is to have a a production that you
Yes.
can tour with. That's
Yes.
great.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Iris, I want to thank you for trying to get Michael and myself a job with Skye.
Well, I really wanted to see, believe it or not, whether you wanted to work there. You know, this is, I think, important too. A lot of actors say, oh, I would love to work at Outre Theatre. And I'll say, oh, really? And I'll say, and I could see an actor saying, it's not my cup of tea.
And I'm sure that there are many actors that it's what we do is not for them, and that's perfectly fine. I'm sure there are designers that what we do is not for them, and audience members, and that's okay. You know, everybody has their own taste in what they like to do and what they like to be involved in.
But you've developed, and I'm never going to be able to phrase this correctly, but you and I think Slowburn Theatre Company, the two of you, have developed an entire half generation of theater actors who were previously either just coming out of college or were professionals but were not getting jobs. I can think of numerous people, Christina Groom is a good example, who, you know, had been working but were not getting the jobs that got them attention. And people like you and Slowburn have given her and Ann Chamberlain and Rick Pena and Anne-Marie Olson, who just knocked everybody dead recently in another show, and have basically developed this whole half or completely new generation of actors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well,
how that comes about?
I think for both Slowburn and for Outre, we wanted to build that next generation. We wanted to bring in people that had not been given that opportunity to show what they could do. Slowburn's focus has always been musical theater. Ours has been sort of a blend between musical theater and straight plays. And so I guess between the two of us, we've given those opportunities to actors that maybe they were good, but nobody had just picked them up yet. And to watch actors that nobody had heard of, like Mike Westrich, who
was just about
have
to say.
skyrocketed in the last 3 to 4 years.
Right.
Who's Mike Westrich?
Well, I had no idea who you were talking about.
Mean.
That nobody knew who they were. And then we give them a chance, and Slowburn gives them a chance, and suddenly everybody's like, oh my God, where did they come from? Well, they were here, and that's not to say, I understand where a lot of artistic directors come from. It's always easier to go with somebody that you know their habits, you know that they'll show up to rehearsal on time, that they're not going to freak out in the middle of the process. But on the other hand, you want to give that opportunity.
Sure.
You want to help.
And it's fun because you see someone like Mike Westridge and the talent's there. It's just a matter of giving that opportunity to let them shine, to let them show what they have.
When we did Thrill Me.
Yes, let's
Connor-
talk about Thrill Me.
Sure.
Which I saw.
When we were looking for the actor to play Richard Loeb, who is the darker half, and Sabrina came to me and said, Connor. And I'd only ever seen Connor in comedic roles.
Connor Walton.
Connor Walton.
Yeah.
I'd only ever seen Connor Walton in comedic roles. I had never seen him in a dark, serious role. And Sabrina said, trust me on this. Just have him come in, have him read, have him sing for you. And I brought him in, and the darkness just poured out of him.
Let's talk about the play.
Yes.
Let's talk about, trust me, because it's fascinating, I'm sure, for the audience too.
Well, Thrill Me is a 2-person musical. It is 2 actors and a piano. It is about Richard Loeb and Nathan Leopold, the infamous child killers from the early 20th century. They were 2 young men, they were in college, they were lovers. They decided that they would commit the perfect crime because they figured that they were more intelligent than anyone around them. And so they kidnapped a young man, a young boy, and bludgeoned him to death and stuck his body in a culvert and figured that they would get away with it because they were smarter than the police were, and were caught within a matter of weeks because they weren't smarter than the police were. But it is a beautiful, beautiful piece. Stephen Dolganoff, the playwright, has focused on the relationship between the two and the power dynamics between them. And the question that we focus on in the play is, how far would you go for someone that you loved? Would you commit a crime? Would you commit murder for the person that you loved, would you sell your soul for them? And I think for many people, that's a question really, you kind of play around with, but you don't really think about. How far would you go for that person that you love?
And the fact, it's based on fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you stuck to the facts.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
But you sang about it.
But we did
I was going to say, it's a musical.
It is a musical about child killers.
It really was unique.
But I think it's a prime example of the type of work that you gravitate to,
Yes.
where here was this really dark subject, but done beautifully. And that's kind of the sort of work that Outre does.
Yes, yes. A lot of our work, we have been known to be dark. But again, a lot of that comes from the subject matters. And we do comedies, but they tend to be very dark.
Mr. Marmalade.
Mr. Marmalade, about a 4-year-old little girl and her imaginary best friend who is a cocaine addict who beats his personal assistant. And it's, that's the kind of stuff that we do. It's, it is very dark, but some of it is very funny, some of it is very moving. One of the things that I heard a lot of during Thrill Me was audience members telling me, I had no idea I would care so much for these men, especially for Connor's character, for Richard Loeb, because he starts off as such a dark, twisted character, and then to see as the play progresses more and more of why he's doing this and what has gone wrong inside his head to bring him to this point.
What about original work? Have you all done any original work, and is that something that's on the plate for you?
Well, we have done original works in the past. We've done concert productions of original works and readings, but not full productions yet. One that we did was called The Journey. It was by Kristen Long, who was our musical director for quite a long time. Beautiful piece about New Orleans, about a group of young people there in the post-Katrina years and trying to figure out what their lives were and where they should go. We are doing a modern-day interpretation of Medea that is being written by myself and Shannon Willett, called The Violet Hour.
You're rewriting Medea.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we're taking it and we're putting it in a modern context.
And a happy ending. No.
No. It wouldn't be Outre if it had a happy ending.
Who's Medea? Isn't that
Tyler Perry?
But we're anxious for people to come to your theater. That we promote theater. That's what we do. It just, we want everybody to go. But let's talk about the room that you're in.
Yes.
And the fact that it is dinner theater?
Yeah,
Let's talk. You'll explain it.
We should do Titus Andronicus there. It is a cabaret room. Rather than having traditional theater seating, it is 4 top tables. And the Broward Center does provide food beforehand, as well as, or they do sell food beforehand and alcohol. They have a full bar and that sort of thing. And what it allows us to do is to go into the audience, which is something that we love to do. We love to break that fourth wall and involve our audience in what's going on, whether that's speaking to them directly or just moving among them and allowing them to feel as if they're part of the world that we are creating, that they're not outside observers.
Yeah, I have to say I've been in that space several times, and I love it. I think it's great. It's just the right size. It's intimate, but at the same time, it's not so tiny where you're uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there are tables doesn't mean that you have to eat. You can go and just have a drink, or you can just go and see the show.
Right. And it also means that on a good night, that where we're sold out or whatever, you end up sitting with people that you didn't know.
Yes.
And
yes.
you start talking over a couple drinks and you meet new friends and go to see shows together, and it's wonderful.
So if they wanted to contact you, or how would they find out how to get tickets? Do you have a website?
For the tickets, the easiest thing to do is to go to the Broward Center's website. Mm-hmm. All of our tickets are sold through them. It's browardcenter.org. Mm-hmm. And just for more information about us, our website, which is just outretheatrecompany.com, is the easiest way to find out information about the shows that we have coming up and about ourselves as a company.
Mm-hmm. And if actors wanted to audition for Outre, or
We have season auditions every spring, generally in the April-May timeframe. We announce our seasons in January so people can look at it and see if there's something there for them or something that they're interested in. And then we cast the shows, and usually everything is cast by May or June.
Do you feel, there are some theaters that feel they have to hit a home run every time, and there are other theaters who want to have permission to fail, who want to be able to push boundaries, and they want to make a success, but they don't. That's not necessarily the only thing. Where do you guys fall in that spectrum?
It would be nice to hit a home run every time.
Sure.
It would. But I think that what we're doing has more to do with making people think than getting into their wallet.
But financially, I think
Most certainly.
it's important.
It's hard. It is very hard.
They must come to the theater.
But you know, again, theater being like life, you know, sometimes we're not always successful in everything we do. You know, the thing that matters is that we put out the effort and we do the best we can. And sometimes, you know, we strike oil, and sometimes, you know, it's a dry ditch.
And it does. It happens. I would prefer to put on extremely good work that was true to what I wanted to do than to put on mediocre work that lots of people came to see.
Great.
That's a great attitude.
Thank you. Thanks, Skye.
Thank you,
Thank you so
guys.
much for being here with us today.
I appreciate that.
And thank you for being here with us today at Spotlight on the Arts. We encourage you to come back next week where we'll have another show for you. Thank you to our panel, Mike, Iris, and Bill. And if you'd like to know what's going on in South Florida Theater, please visit floridatheateronstage.com. Please, we encourage you to visit the theater. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm Karen Stevens. Bye-bye.